Welcome to Conversations with Chuck Hester, a weekly podcast designed to inform and entertain you and introduce you to some really interesting and inspiring people. And I'm your host, Chuck Hester. And today I have one of my favorite people on. This is Lindsay Sutherland Boal. Lindsay is the founder of She Walks, the Great Canadian Take Back Your Power Tour, a 7,315 kilometer, which is 4,545 miles, walk across Canada to raise $250,000 and build awareness for registered women's recovery groups. The initiative launches on August 24th, 2021. Lindsay's also the host and producer of the COVID Chronicles Canada podcast. She's a former opera singer, actress, and current spark plug for all things good. She's also the latest recipient of our Pay It Forward Tuesdays initiative. Welcome to the show, Lindsay. See? And for my listeners who may be listening to this on replay, save it until you're not feeling great, you're depressed a little, and then let's do this, because every time I have a conversation with Lindsay, I can't help but smile and really have a lot of good fun with that. So I appreciate you, ma'am. Thank you for coming on.
I am so thrilled to be here. It's an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. So one of the things that, and we were talking about this off air, is the passion pivot and where people are going based on COVID and what's happening. Hey, I can do some certain things. Our mutual friend, Leslie M, talks a lot about that as well. So my listeners always like to hear from my guests the origin story, if you will. So walk through some of that with us, Lindsay, as to who you were, and where you are now.
Thank you. Okay, so January 24th, 2021 was the best day of my life. However, January 24th, 2020 was not. That's where this story starts. So January 24th, 2020, I woke up in the morning like I had every day for a long time prior to that, with a killer hangover, killer headache, and miserable and out of shape. And something was very different that morning. I went down to my kitchen to make my coffee the way I make it every morning, but it was like I was seeing my world through a different lens. It's like I had put on glasses. And I had, in that moment, come to a place where I was saying to myself what I already knew to be true. I knew that I had a problem with alcohol, and I knew that it had negatively impacted my life in every area. And I knew that it was time to do something about it. And so January 24th, 2020, I made the powerful and purposeful decision to get help. And so what had prevented me from getting help earlier, even though I needed it earlier, is I didn't know what recovery options were available to me. I didn't identify with what I perceived to be the only two pathways available. So I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to do something about it. So I went through this process of recovery, which was difficult, grueling, extremely rewarding, and it has completely transformed my life into this magical place that I now live. And so, so what had happened is I kept my journey quite private. And when I was sober in about 11 months, that was the first time that I chose to speak publicly about my journey to get sober. And I did it in a private mom group called Rebel Mamas. And there's 8,000 women in this group. And I posted it was a big moment for me. And so I wasn't going to say that I was an alcoholic. I wasn't going to say any of that. But what I was prepared to say was that I had had a drinking problem. I didn't say that. What I said is that I had stopped drinking and that my life had positively changed in these 4 ways. And that if anybody had their own concerns about their drinking, they could DM me and I would share my resources. Fine. And so that was a very courageous post for me to make, but it's a private group and there's 8,000 women in this group. And so within 24 hours, there was 1,500 engagements and comments on that post. And what was even more striking was 54 women direct messaged me and said, I need help and I don't know what to do. And I thought, oh my goodness. And that was a real moment for me. And then I responded to all of those women, and I invited them to the Zoom call created, where there were other women from that group. We all had kids, and we all knew when we got to the room that all of us called me for the same reason. We were all saying that we had a problem and didn't know what to do. And so there were 30 women on those calls, and I'm still in contact with them, and 28 of them are still sober today. Okay, so file that. And so that was in December. And then in January, when I was preparing to celebrate my 1 year of sobriety, which people do, and they have parties and all kinds of things, what I had done while I was getting sober is I started to walk a lot. That was a key part of my recovery. And when I first started getting sober, I could only walk 2 kilometers a day. And that's about a mile a day. And it wasn't very much, but I was so out of shape and I was overweight. But the longer I was sober, the longer I could walk. And so by the time I got to that post I made on Rebel Mamas, I was walking 10 kilometers a day. I had lost 30 pounds and I found a 1-pack. Like, this for me was epic, right? So by the time I was ready to celebrate my 1 year, I didn't want to have a cake, a unicorn cake, which a lot of people do, but I didn't want to eat the calories because I was fit and found my 1-pack. But what I did want to do was go on this big walk, because now I was fit, I was in shape, and I could do it. And I thought, okay, how can I make my 1 year walk important and meaningful? So I'm like, okay, 365 days, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, I can go on a 36.5 kilometer walk, which is about 21 miles. And so I'm like, that's great. And so what could my markers be of the walk? And so I thought about it, and I thought of the 5 women that stood up and supported me in my first year of sobriety. And I thought, I'm going to walk to the front doors of all of their homes and give my thanks. And so I did. I walked to Liz's house, Melissa's house, Danielle's house, Lori's house, and Jen's house, and also to She Recovers, which was my support group. And when I put in their addresses in Google Maps, it came out at 36.5K. It's crazy. So as I was preparing to do that, I remembered my post on Rebel Mamas. And I thought, I think I'm ready to come out about this. I think I'm ready to announce that I have overcome this. And so I decided that I wanted to cross-post on all social media and just be free of my past. But before I was ready to do that, I had to talk to my boss. In my case, my boss is my husband, who has been a complete champion of me getting sober this entire time. And I said to Craig, I think I want to come out publicly about my struggle, and I want to do that on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. But as your vice president of relationship development, I think it is important that I discuss this with you first, because I'm concerned about the optics for your company. And just the week prior, I had a conversation with some colleagues who said, Lindsay, are you sure that you want to come out about this publicly, because you're going to affect your career trajectory, because this is dangerous territory. Nobody comes out and says that they had this problem and it not negatively affect their lives. And that's when I knew that I had to talk about it. And so I said to my husband, this is what I want to do. And he said, oh, Lindsay, thanks for post it. I said, what? Really? I wasn't expecting him to be so supportive so fast, And of course he was. And so the day I went for my walk, it was like the slowest post in my life. I'm like, and I posted it, and it went to LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I shut my computer and I went for my walk. And January 24th, 2021 was the best day of my life, because I felt like my entire world had just opened, because I was living in the possibility of who I was becoming, and it was thrilling. And so when I got home, I opened up my computer to know that I was going to lose a bunch of followers and friends and all kinds of stuff. And my husband had balloons and Stolz Bank, and I had 7,000 messages of support. And I thought, it's time to do something about that. So She Walks is my response to what had happened to me. And so I have decided to walk across my country And instead of walking to the front doors of the women that supported me, I'm going to walk to all the provinces and territories of my country to give back to the community that needs me to show up. So that's what I'm going to do. I can't hear you.
My fault. So much in there as far as that goes. Yeah, that's great. Technology is great until you forget how to use it. But seriously, there's so much in there. My phrase is always to unpack, if you will, and to talk about, that aspect of it. And by the way, just real quick shout out, one of our good friends, and I know you love him to death, is one of our Pay It Forward 6, Bob Shears, is listening in and making comments on the sidelines. So, hey, Bob, and greatly appreciate you being there. But Lindsay, let's talk a little bit, because you mentioned Craig. Let's talk a little bit about his company, your company, what you do there.
Yeah.
And obviously you've got some amazing support in that regard. So just so people know who you are during the day, if you will,
for sure.
and what you're doing. So talk a little bit about that company as well.
For sure. So I work for Urban Outline Building Group, and Urban Outline builds commercial office space in Toronto. And so we're a general contracting and construction firm in Toronto. And so we build a lot of sexy office space with a lot of really cool design, and a lot of our spaces our designers have won awards for those spaces. And so the business has been around for 11 or 12 years now, and we're continuing to expand. And I'm particularly proud of working for Urban, especially because we build office space in a time where work from home is the new black. We've managed to keep all of our guys working, and as a company, we've managed to get through this pandemic, still here, still strong, still working, and still contributing to the industry. And so my husband is the president of that, and I'm honored that he has incorporated me in his team.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you talk about courage. I mean, honestly, I've known you. We've had a couple conversations. I've known you for about a month or so, and it's fascinating to see the courage that you have to be able to do that, especially social media. And those of us who've have kids and help grow kids up, if you will, and within social media, and even folks who are going, okay, look, I've got a job, and I'm really concerned about talking about specific information about my personal life and how it might affect my brand or my company's brand, or what the boss is going to think, those type of things. So. What's the encouragement? I love the way you did that when you went, I just don't want to hit the button or not. I've been there before, not at the level you have, but is there any advice that you give to somebody to say, hey, does this be transparent? I mean, transparency can be a double-edged sword. No doubt about that, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny. I think COVID has actually been a really good thing in this respect. I think a lot of people are in a position where they're willing to speak about vulnerable situations, and I think folks are more receptive to speaking about vulnerable things. Like, for example, CAMH released a study in June of 2020 suggesting that, or stating that 81% of working Canadians were experiencing mental health issues as a result of the pandemic. And that's 81% of working professionals. So we're not talking about the people who've been furloughed, the people who've been laid off, that kind of thing. And so with the numbers of people that are coming forward and speaking about their vulnerable issues, I think people are more willing to listen, willing to speak, willing to share, willing to accommodate. But also, as evidenced in my own experience with, 3 of my friends who love me to death, that are colleagues, they all sort of said the same thing. And one of them said to me, actually 2 of them said to me, that they would never hire me, even though they know my skill set, they know my ability, and they know that I'm competent. But they would never hire me because they would be concerned about the optics, the risk to their company. So I think if you're going to make a post like that, you got to be really honest with what you're actually saying and what your message actually is. But you do need to talk to your employer about it first, I think, just to be sure that everybody's on the same page and doesn't come as a surprise.
Yeah. And we'll get into this later about how people can contact you and, how you're an inspiration in that regard. And actually, a question from Bob, which is an interesting question in this regard. So, social media, that's one of our areas that you and I and Bob and several other folks within my organization are part of. But have you noticed any trends on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, related to women and alcohol over the past year? Does there seem to be an uptick in those type of posts? I mean, you mentioned mental health. I know COVID. There's COVID blessings and there are COVID curses, right? So. Have you seen an uptick in conversations and what you're talking about in regards to alcoholism and addiction, those type of things?
I absolutely. So there are, I think it's common knowledge, or at least for me, it's common knowledge in the conversations that I'm having on a daily basis, is that, for example, mummy wine culture is a disaster. It's everywhere, and it's wreaking havoc on women's lives. And what I mean by that is there's so much normalizing of getting drunk as a mom, or needing mummy wine juice to be a good mom, or needing mummy wine juice to be the superheroes that we're supposed to be. And it's everywhere, and it's toxic, and it puts those that are vulnerable to drinking too much. It's not helpful, and I think those kinds of posts are completely tone deaf and irresponsible. So the pandemic, I think it's safe to say, I don't think alcoholism or alcohol dependency has gone down, so there's that part, but then there's also this real need and this real desire for people to break free from that, because we are becoming aware that this is a real problem, and it's not just me. Right? Like, if you have people that come forward and say that I have an issue, that just gives permission to other people to say me too. So it works both ways.
Yeah, and I'm a mental health advocate, and I have some really good friends who have some really good organizations around that, burnout and all this stuff they got. And when you start talking about that you know what, I get an anxiety attack, and okay, so everybody else can as well, because we talk about it, and we are prompting the conversation, if you will. Lindsay, let's get into specifics in regards to She Walks, because that's the initiative. And I mentioned you last week on the show because you were the upcoming guest, and I mentioned the 4,545 miles that you're going to be doing for us guys in the United States. We go, okay, we understand 45 better than the 7,000 plus. But so walk it through. Tell us more about, what you're going to be doing, how you're going to be doing. Are you walking 4,500 miles straight? I mean, all of those questions that come out. So let's talk about She Walks Canada in particular.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited about this. I just can't even wait. I'm so excited. So She Walks actually launches in August, but the walk begins January 24th, 2022, which will be another anniversary of my sobriety. And I will be walking a half marathon every day for 365 days until I complete and reach the other side of my country. I will be walking through all the provinces and all of the territories. Part of this walk will be boots on the ground. Part of it will be virtual because I have a child. She's 4, and she started school, and she needs her mother. And so part of it will be in person, part of it will be virtual. All the kilometers will be happening. And another part of this is that I'm inviting She Walks really is an invitation to both the sober and sober curious communities to engage with me in their own She Walks. And so anybody can choose their distance, when they want to do it, where they want to do it from, and they can be pledged so that all of the collective totals, donations go towards the collective She Walks.
That's awesome. Very, very cool to see you be able to do stuff like that. And so let's talk about COVID. I mean, that's been a significant issue. And you were mentioning before we got on the air that you're in Toronto, and it was like Toronto opened up like yesterday or something like that. Is this just to see where that goes. I'm in Houston right now and work in Raleigh as well, and it's slow to happen. But how did COVID affect you, other than the fact that you created a podcast about COVID? But how did it affect you? And you mentioned briefly in regards to yours and your husband company. How's COVID affected you over the last year? And then the second part of that question is really, how are you guys adapting now that we're starting to open up? Is there a difference for remote work and hybrids and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it? So.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, when COVID landed in our lives, March 16th, I remember the day, as somebody who does relationship development for the company, all of my work was out. Like everything I did was out at restaurants, out at clients, everything was out. And I had to quickly pivot to figure out how I was going to do my out job in, right? And my response to that was to have a podcast, because I recognized very quickly that everybody wanted to talk because nobody knew what was going on. And so instead of having those discussions privately, I talked with some of my work associates and said, let's have these conversations publicly. And so the COVID Chronicles Canada was really a response to, how do I continue to do my job and be effective in my job and add value to my organization in a completely new way on the spot, as we're all trying to figure out how to navigate a global pandemic, and then it turned out to be bigger than I thought it was going to be, and I'm very grateful for the guests that I had on and what we were able to share, commonly experience, commonly vent about, and commonly find ways to move forward together. And many of those guests and and Urban Outline are continuing, or for the first time doing business together now. So I'm grateful for that. And then in your second part of that question, how are we moving forward? Could you just talk about that second part again? Sorry, you're muted.
Post-pandemic, how are you moving forward?
From a business perspective?
Yeah, as far as business goes, and is there a different type of business that you're doing now because of the hybrid work that most people are doing at this point in time? Anyway, some are in office, some are going to stay remote, a wide variety of things. Not a lot of, and I know as a business development person, okay, we're not going off to the golf course necessarily all the time and doing cocktail parties and the like. But how's that affected? What do you look like as far as what is the new future of work for you and your company?
Well, just from a perspective about what we're building, I mean, we are a contractor, so we build what's on the drawings. But how people want to work is changing, and so yes, we're building workspaces, continuing to build workspaces. But there's a shift in design. So perhaps that would be a better question to ask designers. But there's things that we've really had to consider, like lead times, because things take longer to get here. Wood is really hard to get, all these kinds of things. So from a constructability point of view, there's some issues there. But how I do my job for Urban has also changed. There is a greater interest in having conversations that matter. I no longer ask, how's anybody doing? Because that answer doesn't really get us anywhere. So I have found that the people with whom we are doing business, those relationships have deepened. They have become more meaningful. Yeah, it's about business, but business is personal, especially now. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and you're the epitome of that as far as that goes. But no, I agree. The deepening of personal relationships, and I've had Tamsin Webster from the Red Thread and what she's been able to do. Storytelling is more important. Getting to know people, understanding. And Brian Basilico, I know you've talked to as well. Part of my Pay It Forward 6. He had a post this morning talking about know, like, and trust, and what does that really look like, and understanding the difference between just, hey, I got your business card, Lindsay, so I'm going to do business with you because you like me, because you give me your business card. Doesn't quite work that way, and being able to make that happen. So relationships, as you mentioned, seems to be, and God bless if that's what's happening, because I'm a relationship guy, and I'll tell you the one big thing that I miss is I miss hugging, quite frankly. Exactly. Being able to embrace and all the kind of good stuff that goes along with that. So my next trip past the Raleigh trip that I'm doing, I'm going to Content Marketing World in Cleveland, and it's late September. I cannot wait to the number of people that we're all huggers there. So can't wait to be able to do that. So it's fascinating to see. So you mentioned, Lindsay, you mentioned LinkedIn, you mentioned Facebook, you mentioned Instagram. Are those your three main channels that you're using on a regular basis?
Yes, they are. I think that for me, I find LinkedIn is a little bit easier for me to navigate, to be honest. I have somebody working with me to manage Instagram, which I'm grateful for. I don't know. I guess I'm not young enough to know how to navigate Instagram and Facebook as well as I should. So fortunately, I have somebody very skilled in that department who's taking that over. But LinkedIn, I'm beginning to get my head around.
Yeah. So, we always talk about, and you're a good example. The people that I've had on, you're the 27th guest on this podcast, and all 27 of you are accessible regardless of title, regardless of, reputation, whatever that may be. And I'll ask this question in two different ways. The first way is, how can people get in touch with you, first of all? And what type of people are you looking to connect with? Obviously for She Walks, there's one thing there. And then I guess the second question is what type of things can you help people with? That's the second part of that question. So we'll go with the first one. What type of people are you looking to connect with? Because there's a significant number of folks between yours and my network and Brian's and the rest of our folks that can help in that regard. So how can we be of service? Like always our favorite question, right?
Thank you. Thank you for asking. So the immediate needs of She Walks is we are looking for corporate sponsorship, frankly. Taking on a national campaign to walk across the country to engage the gender of women or women who identify or people who identify as women to help overcome a substantial issue requires a lot of resources. And so I am looking for corporate sponsorship. I'm looking for people to donate their time who are skilled in event management. She Walks will have an entire education and expert education program actually as part of She Walks, and I need somebody to help me facilitate that. So there's facilitating events as we go through from one side of the country to the other. So that's one part of what I'm looking at. I'm also looking at people who are experts in the field of addiction and recovery to partner with me to help educate the public about what are the resources available. What can we expect from recovery? I want to talk to healthcare professionals so that we can understand what happens in the brain when we go through recovery, what happens through the body, so that we can be prepared and act accordingly. So educational experts, medical experts, corporate donorship, and of course, I want to hear from women who are in or seeking recovery who don't know what to do, because I can share my resources and we can begin the process of moving forward. So off the top, that's what I can think of. But of course, there's many other things.
Yeah. And I'll ask this question. I think I know the answer, but if I'm a guy and my girlfriend, my wife, or whomever has issues, contact you as well, I would imagine too, right?
Yes, of course. It's tricky to speak on behalf of someone else. It's hard to do that. And knowing from my own experience, unless one is ready to make that decision for themselves, it is a very fine line about how to navigate that, because what you don't want to do is offend them so that they go even further away. But absolutely, I would say 6-7 times a week, I have a conversation with somebody I don't know usually it's about how they can move forward in their own lives and the situations they're having. But 2 days ago, I spoke with a fellow who lost his wife to alcoholism, and he was just sharing his support and hoping that he could help somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about my favorite subject, other than She Walks. And that is, and I mentioned at the top of the hour, I mentioned this, and that is that you are one of our recipients of the Pay It Forward Tuesdays initiative. Yeah. So first of all, I'll give a quick overview, and then I want, to have you talk a little bit about your experience, because I know you're in the middle of it right now, because you were our May recipient, and we've been doing some work with you. And one of your guiding guys is Bob Shears, who's actually listening at that point in time, one of my favorite people as far as that goes. But the Pay It Forward Tuesday normally would be the part of this Pay It Forward minute at the end, but let's do this now. Pay It Forward Tuesday is just a quick recap for folks who may not be aware. In December 2020, there was Giving Tuesday, which happens every December. But there was also four additional Tuesdays available. And a good friend of mine, Adam Sinkus, and I got together and said, hey, you know what? We do this anyway. We pay it forward by giving, consulting work on websites and PR and marketing and whatever. What if we do that once a week in December and be able to put that together? We did that. At the end of close to the end of December, we decided that's great, but it's a lot of heavy lifting every week to be able to do it. So we're doing it monthly now. Third Tuesday of the month, we pick a new recipient. And the Pay It Forward 6, which is an active group of folks who are really experts in their field, come alongside you guys, whether you're a 501c3 in your case or an up-and-coming entrepreneur, and we're giving you 3 hours of consulting work on how to run your business, get donors, do whatever. So, Lindsay, talk about that experience, because I know you're in the middle and you've been working with our folks and having a ball doing it. So, share some of that information.
Yeah, 100%. So, I learned about the Pay It Forward Tuesday initiative from Leslie M. And we mentioned her earlier in the program. And Leslie has, she's the world-renowned swagger coach. She's just written a book called Swagger, Unleash Everything You Are and Become Everything You Want. And I learned about Leslie on LinkedIn as she was talking about her book, and I loved what she had to say. And then we got talking, and I told her about She Walks and what I was trying to do, and how I felt really quite overwhelmed because this was a huge initiative, and I am very good at getting sober, connecting with people, and walking, but I'm no good at the jillion other things that are required to pull off a project of this scope. And so she sent me a text message and she said, I just nominated you for the Pay It Forward Tuesday initiative. I'm like, what's that? and then she's like, well, read about it. And so then I said, what? This would be amazing. And then fast forward to a couple days later or a week later, I got a text message on LinkedIn from Adam saying, congratulations, you're the recipient. And of course, I had never met Adam before, but I sent him a voice message, doing something like this. Oh, I'm so excited. And I probably should have gone that down a little bit, but I was so happy to know that I was going to get some help in the areas that I have little experience. Little did I know just how much help I would receive from the Pay It Forward Tuesday initiative, because it's safe to say that She Walks is further along 100% than I would have been had I not had time with this team to help me organize my thoughts, understand the components better of what needed to happen, and then all of the underlying tasks there. Specifically, Bob Shears has been an extraordinary resource from a PR perspective in helping me understand how I can move forward with a PR lens in mind. You've been very helpful, Chuck, with how do I figure out what I'm doing on LinkedIn, and because, everything is a bit of a figure it out as you go, and that can be a bit exhausting. And I found the Pay It Forward initiative team to be a great source of, get the thoughts together. This is the plan. This is how we can help you move forward. And everybody has been more than generous with their hearts, their time. And
I talk to this with my team on a regular basis. We are enriched by the people that we enrich. I mean, the rising tide lift all boats is one of our favorite expressions. And if you want to be lifted up, lift other people up first is a big part of what we do. The other aspect of it is, and you're a big part of this now too, Lindsay, and you know this, we will, by the end of 2021, have 16 individuals and organizations that we've been working with. And that's the Alumni Association, if you will, and folks that I know you've connected with, and other people, other recipients connected with directly, and being able to help each other as far as that goes, to be able to move that forward. So again, congratulations on that, and congratulations on She Walk. Sorry. One of the things I want to be able to do, and by the way, what's the last city in Canada that you will actually end up in when you do your walk?
At this stage, so I start East Coast, I start in Nova Scotia, and I go to British Columbia. That's not I think the final city will be Vancouver. It's not the furthest west, but it is my hometown. And yeah, I think I'm going to curve up and then circle around and come back into Vancouver.
Lindsay, this is always a pleasure to talk to you. If you had a couple of takeaways, maybe 3 takeaways for my audience as to what you want them to get out of what we've had in this conversation, what would they be?
3 things, takeaways. Yeah. First of all, about Pay It Forward. If there are small businesses or nonprofit organizations that, like me, were thinking, "Ooh, I need some help," nominate yourself or nominate your friends for Pay It Forward, because it has been extraordinarily rewarding for me, but I've learned a lot from this organization. Number 2, with regards to recovery, recovery is 1000% possible. We can and do recover. I did. And number 3, please go to shewalkscanada.com and support this initiative. We collectively, as women, can recover. Let's do it together.
Awesome. As usual, like I said, I greatly appreciate your time, Lindsay. And this is not the last conversation you and I have. I know that for a fact. So thank you very much for being on today.
Thank you so much, Chuck.
Do the heart. There we go. That's what I was waiting for. Okay. Cool. So this has been another edition of Conversations with Chuck Hester. They always go way too fast. I know that for a fact. And as we've been talking about the Pay It Forward initiative, I make sure that I shout out Adam Sinkus, Jennifer Radke, Bob Shears, Brian Basilico, Jeff Poche, all actively involved in that. And as we mentioned earlier, if you know somebody who might be a good nominee for Pay It Forward initiatives, please make sure you do that. And then, like Leslie did, you find somebody that you think would be a good recipient for this. We'd be more than happy to entertain that. And if you're a company or organization that provides products and services to small business and entrepreneur community, we're looking for sponsors as well for in-kind products for our 2021 recipients. And it's a great way to pay it forward and build brand equity in your community. Now, next week, on June 23rd, my guest is Sue Cerna. Sue and I have known each other for a long time since she was a reporter in Raleigh. She is the founder and CEO of Cerna Social. It's a specialty social media agency focusing on social media strategy, governance, and security and risk. And she leverages her extensive experience in that space and helping the world's largest companies keep their social media safe. A very, very topical conversation where we have. So make sure you also share this podcast with your friends and connections. The replay will post very soon on Facebook and YouTube. And also through Anchor FM, you can listen to it as an audio podcast through Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many other channels. And that's it for this week. Make sure you take a minute and spend some time uplifting somebody else and acknowledge who they are. That's important. So until next time, this is Chuck Hester reminding you to stay well, stay connected, and always pay it forward.